Today, I'm going to tell you a story so raw it cuts deep, set in the frozen silence of the old American West, a land of howling winds, endless mountains, and laws written by fear and blood. It's a place where one choice can mean freedom or death. It all began with a single act of defiance. A woman stepping away from an altar, small in appearance, yet powerful enough to ignite a war that would change every life it touched. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The wind tore through the Wyoming high country like a wounded animal, hurling snow sideways across the narrow mountain track. Eliza Cross gripped the reins with fingers gone stiff and white. Her wedding dress, once clean and bright, was soaked through now, plastered to her body as she shivered in the saddle. Behind her the sound came again. Hooves. Heavy, relentless, muffled by the storm, yet closer every second. There, she went that way. The shout ripped through the blizzard, raw and cruel as the cold itself. Eliza drove her heels into the mare's sides, forcing the spent animal forward. The horse slipped, hooves skidding on stone, nearly pitching them both down the slope. She had been riding for hours, 3, maybe more, ever since she bolted from the church where her own father had bartered her freedom to settle his debts. Harlan Crow. Just thinking his name twisted her stomach. Crow owned land, men, judges, half the territory, some said, and broke anyone foolish enough to stand in his path. Tobias Cross had lost everything at the card table, and when Crow came to collect, he had looked at Eliza once and decided she was worth more than acres or cattle. Another shout echoed behind her. Closer now. Her heart slammed against her ribs as she guided the mare around a massive boulder. The trail split ahead, one path dropping toward the valley, the other climbing into the mountains. Eliza chose the higher ground without hesitation. Better to die alone in the wilderness than live as Crow's possession. The storm thickened, the world shrinking to a blur of white. She could no longer feel her hands, her feet. The mare's breath burst into the air in ragged clouds, each step slower than the last. They rounded a bend, and the ground vanished. The mare screamed as they plunged down an embankment, tumbling through brush and snow. Eliza was thrown clear, the sky and earth spinning together in a violent blur of pain and cold. She struck something hard. Rock, tree, she didn't know, and stars burst behind her eyes. When everything finally stopped, she lay half buried in a drift, her ankle twisted at a sickening angle. The mare was gone, swallowed by the storm. Eliza tried to stand. Her leg buckled instantly, a broken sob tearing from her chest. This was it. She would die here, frozen in a wedding dress, because she had dared to run. She went this way, fresh tracks. Fear dragged strength out of her. Eliza clawed her way behind a fallen log, pressing herself into the snow despite the fire ripping through her ankle. Through the blowing white, she saw them. 2 riders easing down the trail above. Silas Rourke and Vaughn Mercer. Crow's worst dogs. Men who'd burned a homestead to ash over a single dollar and slept easy afterward. They were almost on top of her now. Eliza held her breath, praying the storm would erase her. Rourke's horse snorted, stamping the snow. "Trail goes cold here," Rourke growled. "That fall probably killed her, and the horse too," Mercer said. "Crow wants her back, dead or alive." He chuckled. "Alive, if he gets his way." The sound made Eliza's skin crawl. She buried her face in the snow, willing herself to disappear. A rifle cracked. Rourke's hat flew from his head, punched clean through. Silence followed, thick, deadly. Both men spun their horses, hands flying to their guns. "Next one won't miss," a deep voice called from above them. "Show yourself," Mercer shouted into the storm. "Who's there?" Another shot struck the ground inches from Mercer's horse. The animal reared, panicked. "Last warning." Eliza had never heard a voice like that. Steady, calm, with something hard and unyielding beneath it. Rourke and Mercer exchanged a look. Rourke spat into the snow. "Crow owns this land," he shouted. "You just signed your death warrant, friend." "I'll take my chances. Now ride." For a moment, Eliza thought they might fight it. Then Mercer muttered something under his breath. The two men turned their horses and rode back the way they'd come. Within minutes, the storm swallowed them whole. Eliza stayed frozen behind the log, shaking, not sure if she'd escaped death or merely traded one threat for another. Footsteps crunched through the snow. A figure emerged from the white, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the ease of someone born to these mountains. Buckskin and fur marked him as Apache. A rifle rested loose in one hand. When he turned his head, scanning the slope, Eliza caught a glimpse of his face. Weathered, strong, framed by long, dark hair. His eyes locked onto her at once, gray-blue and sharp, like storm clouds over deep water. Lines of hard years marked his face, somewhere between 35 and 45. But beneath them lay a deeper weariness, one born of loss, not labor. "You're hurt," he said. His voice was lower now, controlled, quiet, still carrying authority. Eliza tried to answer, but her teeth rattled too hard for words to form. The man, Apache by his bearing and dress, slid his rifle onto his shoulder and moved toward her with slow care, the way a hunter approaches wounded game. "Ankle," she finally forced out. "Twisted, maybe broken." He dropped to one knee beside her, movements steady, deliberate. "Koda," he said, "I've been watching those two trail you for the past hour." His hands were unexpectedly gentle as he tested her ankle through the boot, fingers firm but precise. "Not broken," he said at last. "Bad sprain." "I can't walk," Eliza whispered. Panic cracked her voice. "I can't. They'll come back." "I won't go back there," she said again, shaking her head. "I won't." Koda studied her for a long moment. The torn wedding dress, the fear she couldn't hide. Something shifted in his expression, recognition answering recognition. "They won't find you," he said quietly. "My place isn't far. Can you ride?" "My horse is gone." "Mine isn't." As if summoned, a paint horse stepped out from the trees, compact, sure-footed, bred for bad ground and worse weather. Koda lifted Eliza as if she weighed nothing, careful to keep his touch brief, respectful even in urgency. "Hold on," he said, swinging up behind her. "Storm's turning mean." She leaned back against him as they rode, his solid warmth the only thing holding the cold at bay. The horse threaded paths she couldn't even see, guided by Koda's steady hand. Each jolt sent pain up her leg, but she bit down hard and said nothing. After a while, she raised her voice over the wind. "Why? Why help me?" Koda didn't answer at first. Then, "A man who forces a woman to marry him isn't a man at all, just another kind of wolf." There was more behind those words. She could feel it, but the cold dragged her under. She drifted in and out, aware of trees thinning, a clearing opening, a low structure rising through the snow, a cabin, solid, crouched against the land. Smoke curled from the chimney like a promise. She remembered being lifted down, carried through a doorway into heat, laid onto something soft. Koda murmured words she didn't know, Apache, maybe, a prayer or a vow. Then the dark took her. Eliza woke to the crackle of firewood and the sharp, welcome scent of coffee. For a heartbeat, she didn't know where she was. Log walls, buffalo hide pulled to her chin, furs beneath her. Then memory rushed back. The storm. The chase. The man. She tried to sit up and gasped as pain tore through her ankle. "Easy," Koda said from near the fire, stepping into the light with a steaming mug. "That leg needs time." In the fire's glow, she saw him clearly for the first time. Taller than she'd thought, built with the quiet strength of a man who lived hard and alone. His black hair hung loose past his shoulders, but it was his eyes, storm gray, heavy with old grief, that held her. "How long?" she asked, taking the mug with shaking hands. "Most of the day. Sun's almost gone." He turned back to a rough table, working at something out of sight. "Had to get that dress off you. You'd have frozen." "My sister's clothes are in the trunk, old but warm." Eliza glanced down. She wore a soft buckskin dress, worn smooth with use. Heat climbed her cheeks, but Koda kept his back turned, offering privacy without comment. "Your sister?" she asked. "Gone. 10 years now." Flat words, pain underneath. "Fever took her. My wife too, and my daughter. Half the band that winter." Eliza looked around the cabin with new eyes. Everything was cared for, yet untouched by time. A cooking pot by the hearth, tiny moccasins on a shelf, a corn husk doll in the corner. Not just a shelter, a place of ghosts. "I'm sorry," she said. Koda shrugged lightly, hands never stopping. "Long time ago. You hungry? Stew's still warm." Her stomach answered for her. Venison simmered on the fire as the wind battered the walls outside. And for the first time since she ran, Eliza felt something she hadn't dared to hope for. Safety. As if summoned by the smell alone, Eliza's stomach growled, loud enough to betray her. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten, certainly not at the wedding that morning. The wedding. God. Had it really been only hours ago that Eliza Cross had dragged her into a church and handed her over like a debt to be settled? Koda brought her a bowl of stew and took a seat on a low log near the fire, leaving a careful distance between them. Proper. Deliberate. He ate without a word. Eliza watched him over the rim of her spoon. There was something spare about him, almost monk-like, a man who had stripped his life down to what was necessary. No wasted movement, no idle gesture. "Why do you live up here alone?" she finally asked. "Why does anyone live anywhere?" He set his empty bowl aside. The mountain doesn't ask questions, doesn't make demands, it lets a man be. "That's not really an answer." A faint smile touched his mouth, the first she'd seen. "No, I suppose it isn't." He stared into the fire for a long moment. "After they died, I couldn't stay with the band. Too many memories. Too many children that weren't mine. Too many wives that weren't mine. So I came here. 10 years is a long time to be alone." "Not so long." He stood and gathered their bowls. "The dead make easy company. They don't change. Don't disappoint. They stay how you remember them." Eliza watched him rinse the bowls with practiced ease. Every motion spoke of years spent alone. The cabin was bare but clean. Everything had its place. Tools lined the walls, traps, knives, a bow and quiver. Near the bed, a rough shelf held books, a Bible, a few worn volumes of Shakespeare, farming guides. "You read?" she asked. He nodded once. "Missionaries taught me when I was young. Before I learned, they tried to take our land and our souls." He wiped his hands on a cloth. Books weren't the problem. Words are just words. He knelt beside her then with warm water and clean cloths, rewrapping her ankle with steady care. His touch was gentle, distant, professional. "Not as bad as I feared," he said. "Few days rest, You'll walk again. A week, maybe 2. I can't stay that long. They won't find you. His voice carried calm certainty. The storm wiped your trail. They think you're dead at the bottom of a ravine. And if they come looking, they won't see this place. Men like them don't notice what they don't expect. Eliza wanted to argue, but exhaustion pulled her under. The warmth, the food, the safety. It was more than her body could hold after the terror of the morning. Rest, Koda said, rising. I'll keep watch. Why are you helping me? She murmured. You don't even know my name. Don't need to. I saw enough when those men were hunting you like an animal. He checked his rifle and moved toward the door. Besides, it's been a long time since these walls heard a woman's voice. A place remembers, even when a man tries not to. Eliza drifted off to the sound of him, humming low and slow. An old Apache morning song, heavy with memory. When she woke again, the cabin lay in full darkness. Koda sat by the fire, working a snare from rawhide. Can't sleep? She asked. Don't need much. He glanced up. You? My ankle's throbbing. It wasn't the whole truth. What kept her awake was the strangeness of it all. The cabin, the man, the fragile sense of refuge. Koda crossed the room and returned with a small leather pouch. Willow bark, he said, helps with pain. You haven't asked, Eliza said suddenly. Asked what? Why I was running, why I was in a wedding dress. He handed her the cup, its bitter scent rising with the steam. Figured you'd tell me if you wanted, not my place otherwise. But as she sipped, Eliza realized she did want to tell someone. Needed to. So she told him everything. Her father's gambling debts, Harlan Crow's offer, the wedding she'd been forced into that very morning. Standing at the altar, wearing her mother's dress from 20 years before, while Crow's eyes stripped her down like property already owned. I waited, she said quietly, staring into the mug, until the preacher asked if anyone objected. I said I do, and then I ran, Eliza finished quietly. I took the nearest horse and rode until my lungs burned. Brave, Koda said. Desperate, she corrected. You don't know Harlan Crow. He owns judges, sheriffs, half the territory. By now he's probably got 100 men looking for me. Let them look. There was an edge beneath Koda's calm now. Men like him live on fear. Take that away. And he's just another bully with a gun. Easy for you to say, Eliza started, then stopped, hearing herself. You're not a woman. No, Koda said, but I've seen what men like that do. To women, to children, to anyone they think is weaker. His storm-gray eyes drifted elsewhere. Once, soldiers came through our winter camp, said they were looking for hostiles, found only women, children, and old men. Didn't matter. Silence settled between them, thick with what hadn't been said. Eliza pulled the buffalo hide higher, though she wasn't cold. I'm sorry, she said again, knowing how small the words were. Not your doing. Koda rose and banked the fire for the night. The world's full of men like Crow, different names, same sickness, thinking they can own what was never meant to be owned. He sat back on the low stool by the hearth, clearly his bed. Guilt tugged at her. Take the bed, Eliza said. I've already taken enough. You're hurt, he replied, gentle but final. That's the end of it. She lay back, watching shadows ripple across the walls. Strange how safe she felt, safer than she ever had in her father's house, certainly safer than she would have been in Crow's mansion. Koda, she murmured. Thank you. For everything. He was quiet so long she thought he'd fallen asleep. Then, softly, It's been a long time since anyone said my name. I'd almost forgotten how it sounds. Eliza closed her eyes, the willow bark easing the ache. Tomorrow would bring trouble. Crow wouldn't quit. She couldn't hide forever. But tonight, in this cabin held together by memory, with this quiet warrior keeping watch, she was safe. The last thing she heard was Koda singing low. Apache, not a death song this time, but something that felt like a prayer, or a promise. 3 days passed in the mountain cabin, each one dulling the sharp edge of fear that had driven Eliza there. Her ankle improved under Koda's careful care, and she settled into the rhythm of his solitary life. Morning coffee by the fire, simple meals of venison and roots, evenings spent in companionable silence while he repaired tools and she stitched her torn wedding dress. Not to wear again, just to keep her hands busy. On the 4th evening, everything shifted. Eliza sat by the fire reading from Koda's battered Shakespeare, pages soft as cloth from years of use. He cleaned his rifle with automatic precision. When she looked up, she found him watching her. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "My wife used to read aloud," he said. "I haven't heard those words spoken in 10 years. Her chest tightened. Would you like me to?" He nodded once. Eliza read from The Tempest, her voice filling a space long claimed by silence. When she reached Prospero's speech about the revel's ending, Koda's hands went still. "We are such stuff as dreams are made on," she finished quietly. He swallowed. She loved that line. Said it meant nothing lasts forever, good or bad. "She sounds wise." She was. He set the rifle aside, staring into the fire. Atza, 18 when I married her, 25 when the fever took her. Eliza closed the book. "Tell me about her." For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't. Then the words broke free. He spoke of a woman who laughed like water over stone, who tracked deer better than any warrior, who wouldn't eat meat during the moon of growing things. He spoke of their daughter, Aya, with her mother's eyes and his stubborn chin, just learning to bead when the sickness came. 3 days, he whispered. That's all it took. 3 days and everything I loved turned to ash. Eliza crossed the small space and knelt beside him. She didn't touch him. She sensed that would be too much. But she stayed. Tears traced lines down his weathered face, the first in years. "I haven't spoken their names since I buried them," he said. "Haven't heard a woman's laugh. I made my world small so nothing could hurt like that again." "That isn't living," Eliza said gently. "That's just waiting to die." His eyes met hers, something bright and dangerous passing between them. "Maybe I was," he said, "until I saw you in the snow, fighting for your life. It reminded me there are still things worth fighting for." The fire snapped and hissed, sparks racing up the chimney. Outside, the wind clawed at the cabin walls, but inside the air went still, tight as a held breath. "Eliza," Koda said. Hearing her name on his tongue sounded like a vow. "I need to tell you something. These days," he went on, voice low, "they've felt like spring after the longest winter. But you can't stay here." "I know," Eliza whispered, though the thought of leaving tightened her chest. "Harlan Crow won't stop hunting me." "That's not what I mean." Koda turned sharply, pacing to the window. "It's me. Being near you. I'd forgotten what it feels like to want something. Someone. And that isn't fair to you." Eliza rose, testing her weight. Her ankle barely protested now. "What if I want to stay?" He faced her, hope and fear warring in his eyes. "You don't know what you're saying. I'm nearly twice your age. I have nothing to offer but this cabin, and the ghosts inside it." "Stop." She stepped closer, close enough to see the pulse jumping in his throat. "You think I care about any of that? You didn't just save my life. You see me, not as something to be traded or owned. Just me." "Eliza," her name broke in his mouth. "I was supposed to marry Harlan Crow yesterday," she said, steady despite her racing heart. Standing in that church, I thought my life was over. Maybe it was just beginning. Maybe I had to lose everything to find—" He crossed the space in 2 strides, cupping her face with impossible gentleness. "I haven't kissed a woman in 10 years, he said hoarsely. "I haven't wanted to until now." "Then kiss me," Eliza breathed. He did. It wasn't rough or claiming. It was reverent and desperate, like a man finding air after nearly drowning. When she slid her arms around his neck, she felt him shudder. They broke apart, both breathing hard. Koda rested his forehead against hers. "This is madness," he murmured. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe it's the only sane thing either of us has ever done." She met his eyes. "I can't go back. Not to my father. Not to that life. And you can't keep living with ghosts." He was silent so long she feared she'd gone too far. Then he spoke, careful and sure. "Among my mother's people, marriage isn't papers or preachers. It's 2 people choosing each other. Promises spoken under the sky. The earth listens. The wind carries the words. That's enough." Her breath caught. "What are you saying?" He took her hands, his calloused thumbs warm against her knuckles. "If you're willing, I would speak those words with you. Here. Tonight. Make you my wife in the old way. Then we face whatever comes. Together. But we barely know each other. I know you're brave enough to run when staying would have killed your spirit. I know you're kind enough to read to a lonely fool. And when I thought those men might hurt you, something woke in me I thought was dead forever." His gray eyes held hers. "What else matters?" Eliza thought of her parents' marriage, years of duty and quiet resentment, of Crow's cold possession. Then she looked at the man who had shown her more care in 4 days than she'd known in a lifetime. "Yes," she said simply. Koda's face transformed, wonder pushing sorrow aside. "You're certain?" "I've never been more certain." He kissed her again, deeper now, 10 years of solitude pouring out. When they parted, he was smiling, a real smile that reached his eyes. "There are words to be said, promises to make. Will you trust me?" She nodded. Koda wrapped her in his heavy buffalo coat and led her outside. The storm had passed. The sky blazed with stars. Their breath clouded the cold as he guided her to a flat stone near the cabin. "This is where I buried them," he said softly. "It feels right they witness this." He faced her and began to speak in Apache, the words flowing old and strong. Then he translated, his voice steady. "Before earth and sky, I take you as my wife. I promise to provide, to protect, to honor you as morning honors the sun. I will share my fire, my food, my life. Your sorrow will be my sorrow, your joy, my joy, from this breath until my last." Tears burned Eliza's eyes. What he offered wasn't ownership. It was partnership. Not possession, but shelter. "I don't know the words in your language," she said. "Speak from your heart," he answered. "The wind understands all tongues." She squeezed his hands and drew a breath. "Before earth and sky, I take you as my husband." "I promise to stand beside you," Eliza said, her voice steady now. "To be your partner in all things. I promise to help drive away the ghosts, to fill your quiet with laughter again. I promise to choose you every day, no matter what storms come, from this breath until my last." Koda drew her close, and beneath the wide Wyoming sky, they sealed their vows with a kiss that tasted of beginnings and old wounds finally easing. "My wife," he murmured against her lips, wonder threading his voice. "My husband," she answered, and felt the truth of it settle deep in her bones. They lingered there beneath the stars, holding each other while the wind carried their promises across the mountains. Eliza thought she felt other presences, gentle approval from those who had gone before. Or maybe it was simply hope, fragile and new, taking root in frozen ground. When they went back inside, the cabin felt changed, warmer, fuller, as if the walls themselves understood. "What now?" Eliza asked, suddenly shy. Koda brushed her cheek with infinite care. "Now we learn how to live again. Together." Outside, snow began to fall once more. Inside, spring had finally arrived. Morning broke clear and bitter cold, ice crystals glittering like the land's own celebration. Eliza woke to find Koda already up, tending the fire and fixing breakfast with the same quiet skill she'd come to know. Yet something was different. The distance he once kept was gone, replaced by an easy warmth that made her heart lift. "Morning," she said softly. He turned, smiling. "Morning, wife." The word sent a thrill through her. Wife, not property. Not something owned, but chosen. She wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and joined him by the fire. "We need to talk about what comes next," Koda said, handing her a mug of coffee. "Harlan Crow won't stop. Men like him never do." "I know." She'd tried to stay inside this bubble of unexpected happiness, but reality pressed in. "He'll send more men. Maybe come himself." "That's why we go to town. Face this head on." Her mug paused halfway to her lips. "Town? Koda, that's suicide. He owns the sheriff, the judge. He owns them because people are afraid," Koda said calmly. "Fear looks solid, like ice, until you put weight on it." He sat close enough that their shoulders touched. "I spent 10 years hiding from the world. I won't hide anymore, and I won't ask you to either." "What are you saying?" "We ride to Granger's Crossing. 2 days. We find the preacher. Make our marriage legal the white man's way, too." His gaze held hers. "Then we face Crow together." Her hands trembled as she set the mug down. "You'd walk into his territory, risk everything." "I'd walk through hell itself," Koda said simply. "That's what the vows mean." They spent the morning preparing. Koda packed provisions with practiced ease. Eliza dressed in the sturdy clothes that had once belonged to Atza. Leather leggings, a warm tunic, a fur-lined coat. In the small mirror, she barely recognized herself. The frightened girl who'd fled in a wedding dress was gone. This woman looked capable, strong. "Tell me about Atza," Eliza said as they worked. "Not the sad parts. Tell me what made you love her." Koda paused, a soft smile touching his mouth. "The first time I saw her, she was trying to break a wild Mustang. Stubborn animal kept throwing her. She kept getting back on, hit the dirt a dozen times." "And you helped?" "I offered. She told me, very politely, to find something useful to do." Eliza laughed, the sound brightening the cabin. "Did you?" "I sat on the fence for 3 hours watching her. By sunset, she was riding that horse like she'd raised it from a foal." He shook his head. "That's when I knew." "She sounds wonderful." "She was, and she'd approve of you." He met Eliza's eyes. "She'd say I was a fool to wait so long to start living again." They set out at midday, Eliza riding behind Koda on his paint horse. The mended wedding dress stayed behind in the cabin, a ghost of the life she'd left. As they descended, the land opened wide, white plains stretching beneath a pale blue sky. That night they camped among cottonwoods by a frozen creek. Koda built a small, careful fire. They ate dried venison and flatbread in comfortable silence. When darkness settled, he laid their bedrolls close, but not touching, keeping a respectful distance that both moved and frustrated her. "Koda," Eliza said softly. "We're married," he replied, eyes fixed on the fire. "We are. But you've been through enough already," Koda said quietly. "I want you to be certain, truly certain. Not just grateful. Not just afraid. Eliza stepped to his bedroll and stopped him with a kiss. "I'm sure," she whispered against his mouth. "I chose you under the stars. I choose you now." What followed was slow and careful, two wounded souls finding ease in each other's arms. When it was over, they lay tangled beneath the buffalo robes, Eliza's head resting on his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. "No regrets?" he asked softly. "Only that it took us so long to find each other." The second day's ride was harder. As they drew closer to settled land, Koda grew taut, eyes constantly sweeping the horizon. His caution proved wise when riders appeared in the distance. 3 men cutting across the valley with purpose. "Trouble," Koda murmured, guiding the horse into a dry wash. They slid down and kept low. "Is it them?" Eliza whispered. Koda studied the figures through the glare. "Can't be sure. So we assume yes." He thought for a moment. "There's another route to town. Longer, but safer. Through Massacre Creek." Eliza didn't ask how the creek earned its name. In this country, such stories were as common as dust. They rode through the night, following paths invisible to her but clear as trails to Koda. By dawn, Granger's Crossing came into view, a scatter of rough buildings crouched against the prairie wind. Smoke rose from chimneys. The ring of hammer on iron drifted across the morning. "Remember," Koda said as they approached, "we face this together. No running, no hiding." Eliza nodded, though her heart pounded. They entered town as the sun climbed, drawing stares from early risers, a white woman in native dress riding with an Apache warrior. Granger's Crossing didn't see that every day. Eliza lifted her chin and met the looks head-on. The church stood at the far end of the street, whitewashed walls stark against the mud. Elias Thorne opened the door, a thin man with kind eyes that widened when he saw them. "We need to be married," Koda said plainly. "Legal. Binding." The Reverend glanced between them, flustered. "Do you have witnesses? Papers?" "We have the truth," Eliza said firmly. "Isn't that enough for God's house?" Something in her voice reached him. Thorne stepped aside. "Come in. Tell me." Inside the simple church, Eliza told everything: her forced engagement to Harlan Crow, her escape, Koda's rescue, their vows beneath the stars. Thorne listened without interruption, face grave. "Crow is a powerful man," he said when she finished. "What you're asking could bring his anger down on this town. Or show people they don't have to live in fear," Koda replied quietly. "That's what men like him depend on. Good people doing nothing." Thorne stood silent for a long moment, fingers steepled. Then he nodded. "You're right. I've been quiet too long, watched him ruin too many lives." He straightened. "I'll marry you, properly, and I'll see it recorded." The ceremony was simple. No flowers, no music, just sacred words spoken in a dusty church. When Thorne pronounced them husband and wife before God and the law, something settled deep inside Eliza. This was right. This was home. They were signing the register when the church door banged open. Silas Rourke stood framed by the morning light, hand resting near his pistol. "Well now," he drawled, "Crow's gonna be pleased. His runaway bride, and the savage who stole her, wrapped up neat." Koda moved at once, placing himself between Rourke and Eliza. "She's my wife. Legal and proper. You've no claim." Rourke's smile turned ugly. "Funny thing about legal. It's whatever Crow says it is." "Not in God's house," Elias Thorne said, stepping forward with unexpected steel. "This marriage is valid and will be recorded. Any harm done to them is a crime, before heaven and before the law." Silas Rourke's fingers tightened around his pistol. For a breath, Eliza thought he might draw. Then voices rose outside, the scrape of boots, the murmur swelling as townsfolk gathered, pulled in by the tension. "This isn't finished," Rourke snarled. "Harlan Crow is coming, and when he does, this whole town will learn what happens to anyone who crosses him." He backed out, leaving the door swinging. Through the church windows, Eliza watched people pour into the street. Word spread fast. The bride who ran from Crow, the Apache warrior who claimed her, the preacher who dared bless the Union. There was no turning back now. Elias Thorne breathed. "May God help us all." Koda took Eliza's hand. His grip was steady, unshaken. "Let him come," he said quietly. "We'll be ready." Outside, Eliza saw something she hadn't expected in the faces staring back. Not only fear or curiosity, but a flicker of something else. Hope. Maybe Koda was right. Maybe fear was like ice. Solid until you put weight on it. Time would tell if they were strong enough to break through. News of Harlan Crow's approach reached Granger's Crossing like a storm rolling off the mountains. He was riding in with a dozen men. Some said a territorial marshal rode with him. Others said he carried papers meant to void any marriage, by law or by force. Fear rippled through town like wind through wheat. Eliza stood at the boarding house window where she and Koda had taken a room, watching the street below. Shops shuttered early. Mothers pulled children indoors. The town braced itself. "They're scared," Eliza said softly. Koda joined her, his presence solid at her side. "They've reason to be, but fear can turn to courage fast if someone strikes the spark. And if it doesn't, then we face him alone." He turned her to him. "I meant it. We don't run." A knock cut through the room. Koda's hand drifted to his knife, but Eliza recognized the voice, thin with worry. "Please," Elias Thorne called. "I need to speak with you." They let him in. The preacher's calm was gone, lines carved deep across his brow. "Crow's camped 5 miles out," Thorne said. "He sent word ahead." "What word?" Koda asked, though they both knew. "He demands Eliza be returned by dawn," Thorne said, anger shaking his voice. "He claims the marriage is invalid, that she was already pledged to him, that no savage has the right to take what's his. As if she were cattle to be branded." "And the town elders?" Koda asked, his tone carefully even. "Divided," Thorne admitted. "Some say right is right, others—" He swallowed. "Others say one woman isn't worth the town." Cold spread through Eliza's veins. Before she could speak, Koda stepped forward. "Tell them this," he said quietly. "If they give up one daughter, one piece of land, one life, men like Crow never stop. They take and take until nothing's left but people too broken to resist." Thorne nodded slowly. "You speak truth, but truth doesn't stop bullets." "No," Koda agreed, "but sometimes it makes people willing to face them." After the preacher left, darkness gathered in the room. Eliza held Koda close, feeling the tension coiled beneath his skin, the warrior bracing for what was coming. "Tell me about Massacre Creek," she said suddenly, "where we passed through." He went still. "You don't want that story. I need to understand what we're facing." Koda exhaled. 20 years ago, a wagon train camped there. Families heading west, full of hope. They cut through burial ground, shot buffalo for sport, left the meat to rot. His voice drifted far away. A band of young warriors decided to answer that insult. It went wrong. Women, children. By dawn, the creek ran red. "Your people?" "Some." He paused. And the cavalry's answer was worse. They burned every native camp for 50 miles. Didn't matter who was guilty. He met her eyes. Violence calls to violence until no one remembers who struck first. Eliza straightened. "But we aren't striking first. We're just refusing to be victims. Koda nodded once. Then we stand. For men like Harlan Crow, it was always the same. That night, Eliza and Koda came together with a fierce, aching tenderness, both of them knowing it might be the last time they were allowed such peace. Eliza memorized him, the weight of his body, the smell of leather and sage clinging to his skin, the way he whispered her name like a vow spoken to the dark. Dawn arrived too quickly, bleeding red across the sky. They dressed without words. Koda pulled on his buckskins, his rifle settling across his back. Eliza chose the plain, sturdy clothes of a frontier woman, braiding her hair tight, steadying her hands. Together they walked down the empty street toward the church. Riders were already gathering there. Harlan Crow sat his horse like a monarch, surveying the town as if it belonged to him. He'd brought close to 35 men. Hard faces, hard hands, the kind of sharp, good looks shaped by cruelty. His pale eyes locked onto Eliza at once, and his smile made her skin crawl. "Eliza," he called, his voice carrying. "You've led me a fine chase. Time to end this foolishness." "The only foolish thing here," Koda said, stepping forward, "is you believing you have any claim." Crow's gaze flicked to him, dismissive. "The savage speaks. Tell me, boy, do you know what happened the last time your kind challenged white law in this territory?" "I know what happens when people stand together instead of alone," Koda replied calmly. Eliza noticed movement all around them. Townsfolk emerged from doorways and windows, more than she'd expected. The blacksmith stood gripping his hammer. The schoolteacher lifted her chin, defiant. Old Levi Stone sat outside the general store, an ancient rifle laid across his knees. Crow saw it, too. His smile faltered. "You're willing to die for a runaway woman and her Indian." "We want to live free," someone shouted. "So you don't take our daughters next," another voice added. "Or our land," came a third. "Or our lives." Elias Thorne stepped out of the church, Bible in hand. "Harlan Crow, this woman is legally married in the eyes of God and the law. You have no authority here." "Authority?" Crow snapped. "I own the mortgages on half this town. I own judges, marshals." "You own nothing," Koda cut in. "Just paper and fear's losing its value." Crow's hand twitched toward his gun, then froze as weapons were cocked all around the square. Not many, but enough. "You'd all hang for this," he snarled. "Maybe," the blacksmith said evenly, "but you'd be dead first." The moment stretched tight as a drawn bow. Eliza heard her own heartbeat, felt Koda coiled beside her, ready. One wrong move and the street would run red, just like Massacre Creek. Then, unexpectedly, one of Crow's own men spoke. "Boss?" Silas Rourke said quietly. "Maybe we should go." Crow spun on him. "What?" "Look around," Rourke said, shrugging. "This won't end clean. And for what? One woman who doesn't want you? There's plenty who do." "It's about principle," Crow hissed. "Pride." "And pride ain't worth dying for," Rourke cut in. "Not today." Eliza saw the exact moment Crow understood he'd lost. His men were uneasy. The town stood firm. And the story, how Harlan Crow had been faced down by ordinary townsfolk and one Apache warrior, would spread. "This isn't over," Crow said at last, his voice low with venom. "You've made an enemy today." "We already were," the schoolteacher said clearly. "We're just not afraid anymore." Crow's face darkened. He wheeled his horse around. "Mount up." They rode out slowly, dust trailing behind them. Eliza didn't breathe properly until they were gone from the horizon. Her knees gave way, and Koda caught her, holding her as nervous laughter and tears broke through the crowd. "It's done," someone said, almost disbelieving. "We actually did it." "It's not done," Koda murmured, so only Eliza could hear. "Men like him don't forget. But for today, He looked down at her and smiled. For today, we won. The celebration that followed was quiet, but sincere. Hands were shaken. Koda's shoulder was clapped. Eliza was told, again and again, that she was welcome in Granger's Crossing. The change was subtle, but it was real. Courage had been found and held. As the sun climbed higher, Elias Thorne stepped toward them. "What will you do now?" Eliza looked at Koda and saw her own thoughts mirrored in his eyes. "We'll go home," she said. "Back to the mountain. But not to hide. We'll build something there. A real home." "And if Harlan Crow comes?" Koda's smile cut sharp as a winter wind. "Then he'll learn what it means to threaten an Apache warrior's family. The old way." They left that afternoon, riding together toward the high country. Behind them, Granger's Crossing returned to its routines, quietly changed, though no one yet knew how much. Ahead, the peaks rose white and clean against the sky, offering shelter and the promise of beginnings. "No regrets?" Koda asked, as the town faded from sight. Eliza leaned back against him, feeling his heartbeat. Strong, steady, only one. "What's that?" "That I won't see Crow's face when he realizes his power is broken." Koda laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. "That's my warrior wife talking." Warrior wife. Eliza liked how it felt. She had begun this journey as a runaway bride, property fleeing an owner. She had found something she never expected. Not just love, but strength. Not just a husband, but a partner. Not just escape, but home. The mountains welcomed them back, and if shadows still lingered on the horizon, they would face those together. They had spoken vows beneath the stars, and unlike the papers and threats of men like Harlan Crow, those promises could not be broken. The reckoning came 3 weeks later, on a day when spring strained against winter's grip on the peaks. Eliza was bent over the small garden they had scratched from stubborn soil, greens and herbs fighting to live, when Koda appeared in the doorway. "Riders," he said quietly. 8, coming up the valley." Eliza's hands stilled on the hoe. They had known this would come. Crow was not a man who swallowed humiliation. She followed Koda inside as he checked his weapons, the rifle, the pistol, the knife that never left his side. "How long?" she asked. "An hour. Maybe less." He looked at her, gray eyes unwavering. "You could still take the back trail, head for—" "We've had this talk." Eliza crossed to the trunk where they kept ammunition and began loading spare magazines with practiced calm. 3 weeks in the mountains had hardened her, taught her things she'd never imagined needing. "I'm not leaving." Koda nodded. He'd expected no other answer. "Then we stand?" They worked without speaking. Koda took the front window with his rifle. Eliza covered the side window, the pistol he'd taught her to shoot steady in her hands. The cabin, built as much for defense as shelter, gave them clean lines of fire. The riders emerged as dark shapes against the snow, fanning out as they advanced. Eliza recognized Silas Rourke at once. Beside him rode Harlan Crow. The others were hired guns. She could tell by the way they held themselves, alert and hungry. "Iron Hand," Crow called, his voice carrying. "Send out my property and we'll leave peaceful like." "The only property here is mine," Koda answered, his voice even. "And you're trespassing." Big words for a man outnumbered 8 to 1. 8 to 2, Eliza called, letting them see her at the window. "And this high ground counts for 4 more. She saw the men hesitate, reassessing. Uphill against a fortified position was no easy work, no matter the numbers. "Eliza," Crow said, his tone turning smooth. "You've had your little adventure. Come home. Your father misses you." My father sold me to cover his debts, Eliza replied coldly. I have no father. Then you're alone. What happens when your savage gets himself killed protecting you? Where will you go then? Forward, she said. Always forward. Never back to you. Crow's face hardened. Every man down there is worth $20, dead or alive, in 3 territories. You want that blood on your conscience? The only blood spilled here will be by your choice, Koda said. Leave now, and everyone rides away. Or, Crow sneered. Koda's voice dropped, winter cold. Or I show you what my people call the death of 1,000 cuts. Your men will die clean, you won't. Something in his tone reached the hired guns. Eliza saw it in their eyes, the flicker of doubt, the shift of weight in their saddles. Eliza saw the men trading looks, weighing their chances. $20 wasn't worth dying for. Not against a fortified cabin held by an Apache warrior with nothing left to lose. Boss, one of them began. Shut up, Harlan Crow snapped. First man who turns tail gets a bullet in the back. That was his mistake. Eliza felt it the instant it landed, threatening men who were already on edge. The balance shifted, subtle but real. Then Silas Rourke spoke, his voice carrying. Tell you what, let's settle this proper. He glanced at his boss, then ignored him. You and Koda, single fight, winner takes all. Crow spun on him. What? Makes sense, Rourke went on. Man to man. That's how it's done in his world, right? He lifted his chin toward the cabin. What do you say, Iron Hand? You and Mr. Crow, no blades, no guns. Winner gets the woman. I'm not a prize, Eliza cut in, sharp as glass. No, Koda said calmly. But if Crow wants to die by steel instead of lead, I'll oblige. The clearing went silent. Eliza saw Crow boxed in by his own pride. Refuse, and he'd look weak. Accept, and he faced a man who'd carried a knife since childhood. Fine, Crow spat at last. He dismounted, drawing a Bowie knife from his belt. Let's finish it. Koda looked at Eliza. She wanted to protest, to stop it, but she saw the resolve in his eyes. This wasn't only about them now. It was about breaking Crow's hold once and for all. Koda descended from the cabin, slow and deliberate, his blade catching the pale spring light. The men formed a rough circle as the two faced off. When you're dead, Crow sneered, I'll make her watch while I... He never finished. Koda moved like water. Steel rang as their knives met. Then they were circling, testing. Crow was skilled. Eliza couldn't deny it. He fought with the ruthless efficiency of a man who'd killed before. But Koda was something else entirely. Where Crow hacked and lunged, Koda flowed, every step measured, every strike chosen. First blood went to Koda, a thin line across Crow's sword arm, then another, across the ribs, then another. Eliza understood with icy clarity, the death of 1,000 cuts. Stand still and fight, Crow roared, lunging wild. Koda slipped aside, his blade sketching red along Crow's back. I am fighting, he said evenly. You're just dying. Everyone could see it now. Crow slowed. Blood loss and fatigue dragged him down. His attacks turned sloppy, desperate. When Koda's knife severed the tendons behind Crow's knee, he crashed into the snow. Koda stood over him, blade at his throat. Yield. Go to hell, Crow snarled. After you. But Koda didn't strike. He lifted his gaze to the watching men. You've seen enough. He's beaten. Take him and go. Tell everyone what happened here. Tell them Harlan Crow is finished. You can't let him live, Rourke said quietly. You know that. I know dead martyrs are more dangerous than living cowards, Koda replied. He'll spend the rest of his life knowing he was beaten by the man whose wife he tried to steal. For someone like him, That's worse than death. He stepped back, blade ready. Crow tried to rise, failed, tried again. At last 2 men hauled him to his horse, his face twisted with rage and humiliation, and something else. Fear. He'd stared into death and blinked. "This isn't over," he rasped. "Yes," Koda said simply. "It is. Come near my wife again, and I won't be merciful." His voice never rose. "That's not a threat. It's a promise." They watched the riders retreat down the valley, Crow sagging in his saddle. Only when they were gone did Koda's strength ebb. He dropped to one knee in the blood-stained snow. Eliza ran to him, hands shaking as she searched for wounds. "You're hurt?" "Just tired," he said, breathing hard. He managed a thin smile. "Been a long time since I fought like that." Eliza helped him back to the cabin, where she washed and bound the few shallow cuts Harlan Crow had managed to land. As she worked, the tears she'd been holding finally broke free. "Hey," Koda said softly, catching her wrists. "We won. It's finished." "I know." She drew a shaky breath. "I was so afraid I'd lose you, right after finding you." He pulled her into him, and she breathed in what had become home. Leather, sage, wood smoke. "It'll take more than Harlan Crow to tear us apart," he murmured into her hair. "We're tied by stronger things than fear." That night, tangled together beneath the robes, Eliza asked, "Do you really think he'll stay away?" "His men saw him beaten, bleeding, begging." "That story will run faster than fire," Koda said. "By month's end he'll lose everything. Respect, fear, power. Men like him don't survive that." He was right. Weeks later, a passing trader, Calder Wicks, brought word. Harlan Crow had fled the territory. Creditors seized what he owned once people stopped fearing him. Some said California, others swore Mexico. Eliza didn't care, as long as he was gone. "You showed him mercy," she said to Koda when they heard. "No," he corrected gently. "I gave him justice. Death would have been mercy. Living with failure, that's the sentence." She thought about that as she stood outside their growing homestead. More than a cabin now. And only yesterday she'd felt the first flutter of new life within her. A secret she'd share with Koda tonight. They'd faced the past, and won. Now it was time to build what came next. The evening sun gilded the mountains as Koda joined her, arms wrapping around her from behind. Together they watched the light fade. 2 souls who'd found each other across loss and loneliness. "Any regrets?" he asked, as he often did. She turned in his embrace, lifting a hand to his face. "Only that we don't get more time. A lifetime doesn't feel like enough." He kissed her, soft, sure, full of promise. "Then we'll make every moment count." As stars pricked the dark, the same stars that had witnessed their vows, Eliza knew they would. They'd fought for this life, this love, this freedom, and they would guard it, day by chosen day. The trouble that would echo through the Wyoming territory began with a dust cloud on the horizon. Eliza saw it first, standing by the line where Wash hung to dry. 5 months had passed since Crow's humiliation. 5 months of peace that had lulled them into something dangerously close to ease. "Koda," she called, keeping her voice steady despite the ice forming in her chest. He came from the barn where he'd been working leather. One look at the riders and his face went hard. "Inside." "Now." But Eliza was already moving, mother's instincts fierce though the child wasn't yet born. She took the rifle from its place by the door while Koda checked his ammunition. This felt different. These weren't swaggering bullies. The way they rode, spread out, careful, spoke of men who knew how to kill. "Silas Rourke," Koda said quietly, studying them through the window. "And Vaughn Mercer, 3 more I don't know. I thought Rourke turned on Crow. Money talks louder than conscience for some. He checked his pistol. Movements spare, practiced. Crow must have scraped together enough for one last reach. The riders halted just beyond rifle range. Rourke came forward alone, hands visible but ready. "Ironhand, Mrs. Ironhand," he called. "We've come with an offer." "Say it from there," Koda answered. "Crow's dead," Rourke said. "Killed himself 2 weeks back in California. Before he went, he put a bounty on your heads." Eliza's breath caught. $5,000, Rourke went on. "Each." "That's not an offer," Koda said evenly. "That's a death sentence." "Here's the offer," Silas Rourke went on, voice smooth. "You come along peaceable. We take you to the territorial judge, lay out the whole tale. Maybe the court shows mercy, seeing how Harlan Crow pushed you into it. A few years instead of a rope. Better than dying up here." He tipped his chin toward Eliza. "Leaves your woman alone. Or," Eliza called back, steady and clear, "you turn around right now and ride while you still can." Rourke laughed, thin and humorless. "Ma'am, with respect, there's 5 of us and 2 of you. And word is you're carrying. Your man won't risk you or the baby in a fight." That was their mistake, thinking Koda's love made him weaker instead of deadlier. Eliza saw it in the way his gray eyes iced over, cold as a mountain squall. "You're right," Koda said evenly. "I won't risk them, which is why you're already dead. You just don't know it yet." The first shot cracked from behind the riders. One stranger pitched from his saddle. Confusion rippled. A second report dropped another man near the tree line. Then figures rose from the shadows like spirits, Red Mesa warriors, 5 of them, war-painted and armed. "My brothers," Koda told a stunned Rourke. "Did you think I'd forgotten my people, or that they'd forgotten me?" The odds flipped in a breath. Rourke, Von Mercer, and the last hired gun found themselves trapped between the cabin and the warriors, boxed in and outmatched. "This doesn't have to end in blood," Koda called. "Drop your weapons, live." For a heartbeat, it seemed they might. Then Mercer, always meaner than smart, reached for his gun. The clearing exploded. Eliza dropped to one knee at the window, breath steady, sight true. Her rifle bucked. She saw Mercer twist, clutching his shoulder where her bullet struck. Koda's rifle thundered beside her, and the last hired gun toppled from his horse. Rourke broke, spurring straight for the cabin. His horse screamed and went down as bullets found flesh. He rolled clear, came up running, pistol raised. Koda stepped out to meet him. They faced each other across 20 feet of churned snow. Blood ran from a graze along Rourke's temple. His gun hand trembled. "Should have stayed bought," Koda said quietly. "A man's got to eat," Rourke shot back. "Not on my family's blood." They drew together. 2 shots rang as one, echoing off the walls of the valley. For a heartbeat, both stood. Then Rourke's pistol slipped from his fingers and he folded to the ground, red spreading across his chest. Koda turned. Eliza saw blood on his sleeve. Before she could cry out, he lifted a hand. Just a graze, nothing more. The Red Mesa warriors moved among the fallen, checking for life. Mercer groaned, alive, but broken. The eldest stepped forward, iron-gray braids framing a weathered face. Koda had named him Nokai. "It's done, brother," Nokai said. "My thanks," Koda answered formally. "The dead are heavy," Nokai replied, a rare smile creasing his face. "No debt between family. Besides, Crow's men owed us, for what they did to young Eagle's sister. Justice, twice over. They bound Mercer's wounds, enough to keep him alive for the ride to town, where he'd face trial for attempted murder. The others were wrapped and loaded." "Self-defense," Nokai said, practical as the law required. As the warriors prepared to leave with Mercer and the proof, Nokai drew Koda aside. Eliza couldn't hear their low words, but she saw Koda nod, grave and thoughtful. "What did he say?" she asked after they were alone again. The yard stained red, the sun sinking. "That the reservation isn't far," Koda said. "That family should be close when babies come." His hand settled gently over her swelling belly. "And that maybe it's time to stop living with ghosts." Eliza leaned into him, feeling the warmth they'd built and defended. "And what do you think?" Koda was quiet a long moment. "I think Atsa would want our child to know both worlds, to have family beyond these walls." "Our child," Eliza echoed softly, still marveling at how far they'd come from that terror-driven ride through a blizzard. Stars began to prick the dark. Tomorrow would bring questions, authorities, explanations. But with 5 known outlaws, a bounty on their heads, and witnesses to tell the truth, even territorial justice couldn't look away. "Will this ever end?" Eliza Cross asked quietly. "The violence, the people trying to tear us apart." "It will," Koda said, turning her toward him. "Harlan Crow is gone. His money went with him. After today, the word will travel. Leave us alone or pay for it." His hands were steady, sure. "We earned our peace." Eliza thought of the women in town, with their safe routines, never knowing the wild grace of being chosen beneath stars, of building love from solitude, of standing shoulder to shoulder with the man you love while danger pressed in. "I wouldn't trade it," she said fiercely. "Not a second, not even this." She glanced at the blood-darkened snow. "Especially not this." They held each other that night with a tenderness sharpened by survival, every touch an affirmation of life. Later, as Koda slept, Eliza felt the child stir, strong, certain. A fighter already, born of a warrior and a woman who refused to be owned. She whispered into the dark, a promise meant for those who had come before. "I'll take care of them. Both of them." The wind moved softly along the cabin walls, and she thought she heard an answer. Gentle as spring rain, morning would bring questions and the work of rebuilding what violence had torn. But tonight, Eliza lay in her husband's arms, their child safe within her, their enemies scattered. They had faced the storm and endured. More than endured. They had won. Spring returned to the Wyoming mountains like a vow kept, greening the valleys and setting wildflowers loose around the expanded cabin. Eliza stood in the doorway of their new home. No longer a refuge, but a house with rooms for children yet to come, windows that greeted the sunrise, and a kitchen ready for laughter. The baby kicked again. Soon now. Nearby, Koda set posts for a corral. They'd decided on horses, his knowledge, her head for trade, a good match. "Riders," he called, calm as ever. Eliza shaded her eyes. "Elias Thorne, and he's brought others." A small group from Granger's Crossing rode in, the Reverend Mabel Quinn, Orrin Black, and, unexpectedly, young Levi Stone, newly appointed after the old corruption was rooted out. "Mrs. Cross," Thorne said warmly as they dismounted, "you're blooming like the season." She smiled and offered water. "What brings you all this way?" "Several things," Thorne said. "First, to see how you're faring. Second, news. And third," he glanced at the others, "a proposal." Koda joined them, greeting each in turn. The respect in their eyes still surprised Eliza. Levi Stone spoke up. "Vaughn Mercer testified before he died about the bounty, Crow's End, the attempt on your lives. Judge Alden Marr cleared you both. More than that, there's talk of commendation for breaking Crow's grip on the territory." "And the proposal?" Eliza prompted. Mabel Quinn stepped forward, hope softening her usual sternness. The town's growing. Families are coming because Granger's Crossing stood up to a bully. We need a school. A real one." Eliza hesitated. "I'm no teacher." "You're more than you think," Mabel said gently, "and the children would be lucky." Eliza felt Koda's hand at her back, steady and warm. The mountains watched. The work of building had begun. Mabel Quinn lifted a hand before Eliza could finish. "But you could be," she said gently. "You read well, you write clean, you keep accounts. More than that, you understand both worlds, the one we're building and the one that was here long before us." Her glance toward Koda carried meaning. The children need someone who can prepare them for what's coming without erasing what came before. "And horses," Orrin Black added. "Good mountain stock, trained right. Word is you're starting a breeding line. The council asked me to talk first about purchase rights." Eliza looked to Koda and found her own thoughts mirrored there. To belong, to build something larger than themselves. Wasn't that what they'd fought for all along? "There's one more thing," Elias Thorne said quietly. "Your father, Eliza, he's been asking after you." Eliza's shoulders tightened. "He has no claim on me." "No, he doesn't," Thorne agreed. "But he's changed. After Harlan Crow died, the debts came due. Without Crow's protection, he couldn't dodge them. He's clerking now. Honest work. He asked me to say he's sorry, that's all." Koda's hand closed around Eliza's, steady and warm. "Maybe someday," Eliza said at last. "When I'm ready. Not before." Thorne nodded. "Forgiveness can't be forced. Like spring. It comes in its own time." They talked through the afternoon, plans unfolding into shape. A schoolhouse set between town and reservation where every child would be welcome. A horse operation to strengthen the valley's economy. A future grounded in cooperation rather than conquest. As the visitors prepared to leave, Mabel pressed a wrapped bundle into Eliza's hands. "For the baby, from the women in town." Inside lay a quilt, each square stitched by a different pair of hands. A community's welcome for a child not yet born. "Thank you," Eliza whispered, eyes burning, "for all of it." After they were gone, Eliza and Koda sat on the new porch while the sun turned the peaks to gold. The baby shifted hard enough to make her gasp. "Soon," Koda murmured, his palm gentle on her belly. "Are you ready? For the baby? The school? The future?" Eliza laughed softly. "I don't know, but we'll face it the way we've faced everything else. Together. Always." 3 weeks later, as spring storms rolled across the mountains, their daughter arrived with a cry strong enough to wake the ancestors. They named her Ashlyn, a hope made flesh, a bridge between worlds in a single name. Nokai and his family came from the reservation with gifts and blessings. Townsfolk followed, awkward at first, then sincere, learning as they went. Eliza watched Mabel practice a cradle song taught by Nokai's wife, saw Orrin share blacksmith tricks with young men from Red Mesa, and felt something settle into place. "This is how it should be," Eliza said one evening as Ashlyn nursed. "Not perfect, trying, healing." Koda kissed her forehead, then their daughters. "You made this." "We did," Eliza corrected. "From that first moment in the blizzard, we did it together." Summer brought the school's walls, raised by hands from both communities. Eliza directed the work with Ashlyn tied to her back. Koda and the men set beams and roofed before autumn. 20 children filled the room, learning letters and numbers alongside respect for the land and its first people. The horse line prospered. Koda's training and Eliza's bargaining built something steady. They hired young men from town and reservation alike, learning side by side. 1 year became 2, then 5. Ashlyn grew strong and fearless, at ease in buckskin and calico, speaking English and Lakota with a child's certainty. Brothers followed, Rowan, quiet and observant like his father, and Jace, laughing like spring thunder on a clear fall day. One afternoon, as Eliza taught and Koda worked a young stallion, a lone rider approached. Eliza knew him despite the years. Tobias Cross, grayer now, worn by honest labor and regret. "Eliza," he said simply, "I have no right to ask. I only wanted to see you, to say—" "I know what you came to say," Eliza replied, steady though her heart raced. "I needed time to decide if I could hear it." They talked for hours while the children played nearby under Koda's watchful eye. Tobias held Ashlyn briefly, wonder softening his lined face. When he left, Eliza felt lighter, not reconciled, not yet, but open to what might come. Forgiveness, like spring, moved slowly. But it did come. "No regrets?" Koda asked that night, the question they had made a habit of asking when the world finally grew quiet. Eliza let her gaze travel through their home, the soft rise and fall of sleeping children, the solid walls they had raised with their own hands, the steady life they had carved from hardship. Beyond the window, lantern lights dotted the valley, town and Red Mesa camps no longer distant worlds but neighbors, drawing closer with every passing year. "How could I regret any road that brought me here?" she said softly. "That brought us here." They came together with a tenderness born of knowing how easily all of it could have been lost, how fiercely it had been earned. Later, when Koda slept, Eliza stepped onto the porch. Above her, the stars turned slowly, the same stars that once watched a terrified woman flee through a blizzard and a solitary warrior make a vow without knowing where it would lead. "Thank you," she whispered, to the stars, to Atsa, to the mountains, to whatever unseen force had guided two wounded souls toward something whole. The wind carried her words away, taking with it the last weight of the past. Tomorrow would bring its own demands, children to guide, bridges to strengthen, a life to keep building one day at a time. But tonight, Eliza Cross stood rooted in her own choosing, a woman who belonged to herself, a wife to a man who had offered protection without chains, a mother raising children who would know no limits except those they set for themselves. From a bride running through snow to a partner standing unbroken beside a warrior, her path had been worth every frightening, luminous step. And it was far from finished. Inside, Ashlyn whimpered in her sleep. Eliza went to her, lifting her gently, humming a lullaby that wove English words with old mountain melodies. As the child settled, Eliza smiled. This was victory. Not the gunfire or the reckonings, necessary though they had been, but this quiet moment. A child safe, a husband breathing steadily nearby, two communities learning to grow together instead of apart. The frontier was changing, slowly and stubbornly, and Eliza Cross, who had once stumbled through a storm in a torn wedding dress, was proud to be part of that change. The mountains stood as they always had, silent witnesses to the small human lives unfolding in their shadow. If they could speak, they would tell of many loves, but few as hard-won as this one. A love chosen again and again in defiance of fear, prejudice, and fate itself. Their story did not end with a neat promise of happiness. It went on, with work, with hope, with courage, building tomorrow one precious day at a time. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for giving your time to this story. Some journeys shape us, and we hope this one left a mark on your heart. There are more paths ahead, more legends of love, hardship, and redemption beneath the western sky. Please subscribe, leave your thoughts, and travel with us once again. Thank you, and God bless. Aviso Legal. Disclaimer. The stories presented here are creative expressions and may mix historical inspiration with dramatized scenes. AI tools contribute to some elements of voice, imagery, and structure, but every published story is refined by editors and creators to ensure authentic emotional impact. We honor YouTube's policies and do not generate deceptive likenesses or artificial depictions of real people. All audiovisual components are legally licensed. Any use, redistribution, or alteration of this content must be granted through written consent. Your presence here means a lot. Thank you for supporting artistic storytelling.